Revolution from your bed, and we are in a new season. And I actually have a special guest. I met Yair when I was admitted to a hospital following my own self-diagnosis of POTS. Yair was there for other circumstances, but we ended up sitting for hours upon hours every day talking, and we remained friends more than 15 years later. Yair is a life coach that is actually specializing in helping young people find their place in the world and connect to their authenticity. Welcome to my podcast, Yair. I'm super happy to have you.
Thank you. I'm super excited.
So cool. This is going to be a bit different than what I'm usually doing because, as you might have known, usually I'm bringing guests that did something regarding recovery from illness, or they're trying to build something a bit different. And this time it's not going to be more of an interview, it's going to be more like a conversation. And the conversation that we thought about doing today, it's about finding your authentic self. And I'm willing to be the guinea pig for today's session, because I'm feeling lately that I'm stepping a bit away from my own authenticity. So I think this one is going to be super interesting. Welcome, Yair.
Definitely. Thank you. So I think the best way to get started is for you to share a bit about what you found yourself struggling with.
Oh, thanks. It's funny to be on the other side of the mic. So as some of my audience know, I founded a few startups and charities, and I've been involved a lot with patient engagement and what I call patient empowerment. And recently, I feel a bit of a dissonance between this grandiose feeling you have stepping on stage, talking to a few hundred people, and then the humbleness you face with dealing with daily life, especially while struggling with a relapse of your illness. In the last few months, I have a huge relapse. It's one of the reasons I haven't recorded any episodes in the last 3 or 4 months. So this would be my main issue, I think.
Okay. So what do you feel like is kind of missing?
I think that this genuine feeling that you wake up in the morning and you feel kind of in tune with yourself, and you walk out there to the world, and you're just you, no matter if you're going to the supermarket or standing on stage or having a coaching session in your case. I feel that it's hard for me to bring myself, my true self, to places, to really be present. I think that would be the point.
Okay. I mean, it's interesting, because we can take this in several directions. And I think what I'm kind of curious about is, when was the last time you did feel that you were able to bring your authentic self to the day to day?
Oh, that's a hard one. That's more for therapy, I think, but that was I'm afraid it was very long ago. Very long ago. I think it was maybe during the lockdown, during COVID, 2020, 2021. I met my current, which was my girlfriend, my current new wife. And I felt that I fell in love with myself again because there were less noises around and I could focus on what I really want. And I told my listeners this story that I stepped away from a startup that I worked on for 3 years because it was not healthy for me and I was burned out. And I just felt like I'm me again. Yeah.
Okay. So what is the startup of today?
Yeah. So we've been working, me and some close friends of mine, we've been working in the last year and a half, almost 2 years, on the idea of a patient school, which a patient school, as you might know, is a place where patients are being trained. It doesn't have to be a physical place, it can be an online, in a few things. First of all, is taking control and responsibility over their own care using self-management and some aspects of coaching, patient education, which is things you need to know regarding more health literacy about your illness. So the idea is wonderful, and my aim was to create a sort of a movement. So I believe the movement idea is starting to roll, because I talk a lot about it and some organizations are starting to roll it, but my own startup, like my own patient school, is not lifting up because of life, and it's kind of damaging my own sense of authenticity.
Is it the fact that it's not really like picking up that's feeling like it's damaging your authenticity?
Yeah, I think I recognize it a bit as kind of a failure and returning to patterns, because, we have a lot of co-founders, everybody's an expert, everybody brings their own voice, and eventually life happened in the way, and then I feel like I have every qualification, every piece of motivation to make it happen, but I can't. It's just like something is completely blocked there. And the way it affects my authenticity is that my authentic self would have been more, hey, let's what we call bootstrap it. Let's just pick it off the ground. Let's put our material somewhere in the on the internet and kind of invite patients that we know to use it, like really act like a startup. But because we try to make it like a perfect thing, it's just staying in the drawer for so many years and nothing happens.
I see. So this is interesting because here basically it feels like the conflict is between the other people involved and where you come up.
Yeah.
So what do the other co-founders say about this? Like, they really insist on it being perfect? Because nothing is perfect. So
yeah, nothing is perfect, but I think that we have a lack of communicating our own. I don't know if I should call it authenticity. Maybe I get the term wrong, but everybody has their own view and their own belief of what these visions should be. Like, some of us think that it should be rolled out no matter what. Some of us think it should be completely perfect. And what I feel is that I'm performing a bit of self-canceling. And this is the feeling that it's not authentic for me, that I'm trying to make everybody at peace and pleasing them and be happy with them. But actually, what I really want to do is to say, hey guys, let it go. Let's just put something out there, and whatever it's working or not, let's see what's happened.
Right. Yeah, this is interesting because when we're talking about living our own authentic life, we can't kind of put it on other people, because this is our authentic life. It shouldn't be other people's. They should have their own say and view. And I think in this kind of situation, I would ask myself, okay, so some of my co-founders, their truth is not rolling with this and not going forward. So what does my authentic truth say that I should do, regardless of what they think or they want or they are doing? Because I can still promote the same ideas and concepts and the actions that I'm inspired to do, regardless of the others.
Can I challenge you on that and ask you, because you're we know each other from I think it was 2009 or something like this, or 8.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen you kind of like a flower that is, growing in this beautiful forest, but then you say, but I'm a flower that wants to have legs and sometimes sit in the desert and sometimes float on the sea, because I've seen you slowly and slowly connecting to your own authenticity. And when I met you, Yair, you were a PhD student in the Hebrew University.
Well, a master's student.
A master's student, sorry, on a track, right, or with the aim, if I'm not mistaken, to go on a very scientific biotechnological PhD, and you were kind of a prodigy in your realm, very youngly already publishing and so on. And at some point you said that actually education and empowering people, coaching people, it's my root. And in the last like 15 years, I've seen you not only growing and finding your authentic self, but you've been around the world in the last few years looking for the right place that feels authentic to you, right? So this is something that I would love to explore also.
Okay. Well, I mean, when it comes to the place, I mean, in the past year or so, it really became apparent and clear to me that living my authentic life and finding my authentic place has nothing to do with geography. It's like I remember us speaking online because you were already in Vienna and I was in Israel when COVID had just like started and things were kind of unclear. But it was already apparent to me that I need to step outside of Israel and find like my own journey and my own let's say path. And we were actually pulling some cards.
Right.
And I remember the cards saying or affirming that, yes, you're going, or I'm speaking to myself, I'm going on this journey to, as you mentioned, like find my place in the world, but the initial steps are going to be finding my place regardless of geography, just like going through the processes that I need to go through in order to really be in a place where I can even like recognize when I am in the right place geographically.
I see. And you've been on this journey for the last 2 or 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember
a bit more than a year.
A bit more than a year that you're abroad, because I remember that like 2 years ago, I was in Germany on a project with my wife, and
right.
You were also in another country. And it's funny because every time we speak, like we are both in different countries which are not Israel. And if I'm not mistaken, you're right now in Taiwan, right?
I am.
And like 6 months ago, you were in Mexico.
It was a bit more than 6 months, yeah.
But and it's not a geography lesson, guys. What I'm trying to say is that you've been hopping around places, and every time we talk, you because we have this like once in 3-4 weeks we have this deep talk that you bring from your coaching, and I usually going into my regular loops, and you say that you're in a place and you're looking to feel this feeling of not only belonging but authenticity. And I want to kind of help our listeners understand, when do you know when the place or the feeling is right for you?
So I don't want to get too much into this because it's a topic that I have like only started like scratching the surface of, which is human design.
Mm-hmm.
But according to human design, we all have what is called our authority, which is sort of like the compass that we use to feel regarding, let's say, our trajectory or what actions we should take and so on. And I have only started experimenting because human design is an experiment. I've only started experimenting with this process in the past year. I literally started a year ago on this journey. And again, without like going too deep into it, because like I'm not an expert in human design and it's like not the main topic right now, but my authority is the sacral authority. And the sacral authority is about feeling in your gut what inspires you, what excites you and following on that. And I feel that it's already something that I have practiced long before I even heard about the term human design, because I can remember that last time I was here in Taiwan, I actually had this kind of like debate about the topic of passion with a friend of mine who's a Buddhist. And, in Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis on the sense of inner peace. And I mean, peace is super important, and we should all have what I see is a baseline of peace. But at least for some of us, and I'm like completely sure that it's true for me, there have to be peaks of like passion, wonder, excitement that kind of like light you up. So
you said light me up, and funnily enough, my own my own lightning here in the studio went off for a second. It's super interesting what you're saying, because you are using terms from human design. Which, can you say a few words about it, just for people who are not familiar with this?
Yeah, just like again, a brief like introduction, because again, I'm not an expert in human design, but human design basically takes into account, it's a system that, as I said, is an experiment. So for each person, they have to feel into the information and how it applies to them. And the system is based on principles that come from this kind of combination of astrology, like Western astrology, and the Chinese I Ching,
Mm-hmm.
and also like channeled information. And so just like in astrology, each person in human design has a chart of their body's energy centers. And the chart is roughly based on the moment at the time of birth, just like in Western astrology, as well as I'm not sure exactly how long, but I think it's like a few months before the moment of birth. And like the two represent the conscious and the subconscious. So essentially, when we're looking at human design, we're looking at our chart, at what centers are active or defined and what are not. And we kind of do a trial and error process with it and feel into it and try to get insight into what makes us tick.
Thank you for this explanation. What I'm recognizing in this pattern of talking to you in the last few years is that you're very intuitive, and you're also using more spiritual tools than a lot of other coaches I've met. You're one of the only coaches that is dealing like with hardcore science, but also with tarot cards and human design, then astrology, and also because you have vast experience in health education and coaching. You're talking about Chinese nutrition and so on. So it's very interesting to me, because when you talk about your authenticity, you're always connected kind of to yourself. And I'm trying to understand how is somebody who has several scientific degrees has come to a point that in your daily coaching, you always base something on more spiritual tools.
That's a tough question to get into. It's a bit difficult to explain, but ever since I was like really young, I've always been attracted to like the mystical or esoteric. And when I apply these more, let's say, mystical tools in my practice, I actually make the connection of the like left brain and right brain, because yes, I do use oracle cards and tarot cards when I work with someone, if they're open to it. Obviously, I'm not forcing it, and like each individual is different. But the way I see it is I tap into these tools in almost like a psychological way, because I use them as archetypes and metaphors to get some more insight into like the inner workings of a person. So, for example, I think most people, when they read tarot, like people who do it professionally, they open up the cards or they have the person open the cards and they kind of channel the information that's relevant for that person. For me, my initial point of contact with the cards is asking you, what do you see in the cards?
This is super interesting. I only know one other person who is doing it. He has a PhD in engineering. He's a super serious person, but when he coaches, he's using tarot cards as an intuitive conversation starter, because he also asks people, hey, what do you see here? And then people are usually really reflecting a lot of what there is a lot of projection of what they're feeling, which is very interesting. But even the fact that you're doing this in a field that sometimes people are looking for more solid kind of help, because if you publish your work and you say I'm using spiritual tools, you're going to attract people who are very open to this. But a lot of time, as far as I know, Yair, you're helping people who are very grounded and not very interested in the spiritual, but you're using the tools. For me, it means that you're using your authenticity, because this is something you feel connected to, and this is something that I feel very detached from at the moment, that I cannot bring my authentic self in my work in the past.
You do not you cannot.
I do not. It's not that I can. I do not. Yeah, it's good. It's a good remark. Is like, I wish I had this brevity to say, hey, like, this is what I like to do, because my work is very strange. Sometimes I can work with Fortune 500 companies, and then you have to play by certain rules. And sometimes I'm working with really groundbreaking entrepreneurs that wants to break the rules, and it can be in the same day, and everything in the middle. And I think that people like my personality that I bring, but I yet to felt that I brought my authentic self into my working realm.
So I feel like in most cases, when people don't allow themselves to bring their authentic selves, it's due to conditioning and fear. So,
can you elaborate on this?
Sure. I mean, most of us as young children already are conditioned by society, by our parents, by the inner circle, to act in a specific way and to display a specific persona. This is what we're expected, and it's very scary at times to really allow ourselves to revolutionize because people expect certain things and we are afraid of not meeting other people's expectations. And we kind of forget that by doing that, we're not meeting our own expectations.
Interesting.
So it's really important, as like, I feel the first step in anyone's journey to embracing their authentic self is to really become aware of who is it or who am I that wants to be vocalized, that wants to be displayed. And very often people are not even aware of that because like we're so heavily conditioned to hide it even from ourselves.
So you mean that we are walking amongst there are some philosophers who call it dead walkers, that most people around us basically are so deeply conditioned that they're not even showing signs of their own authenticity?
I mean, they will definitely show some signs because they can't help it, but they will do so subconsciously.
So basically, is there a method or a way to connect the subconscious with the conscious and start kind of expressing a bit of this authenticity?
Usually the first steps that I would take with people on, let's say, those like initial steps is a combination of the cards and visualization, because those allow us to kind of make a bridge using our metaphors into the subconscious.
That's super interesting. So basically, the way you coach is that you kind of ease the way into this very, very hard and deep process by using more intuitive tools. So if we simulate kind of a regular client you have with me, if somebody comes to you and say, hey, it doesn't matter the success level, because success is another term that we can debate, but somebody like me come and say, hey, I'm a public speaker, but I feel that I'm not authentic in the last few months, the first thing you'll do is to actually ask me to interpret what I see in your cards?
Yeah.
And can you tell a bit more about how does a process like this looks like? Because I'm sure the people that listen to us are saying, okay, I feel ready. I want to I want to find my authentic self. So how does this process looks like?
Well, so I mean, most people, when they come to me, they don't come and say, listen, I don't feel like I am living my authentic self and I want to discover it. Usually people have like a very concrete, let's say down to earth, either challenges or goals that they want to achieve. So they would come to get some more insight and to make a shift in that specific area. So we would start with understanding that particular topic and what their subconscious has to say about it, using the cards, using visualizations, using just asking questions. And then we would make a shift. So it's important that once we have the insight to kind of, I like to use the word manipulate. People often like feel a bit like scared around it, but manipulation is basically just like tuning and shaping things. So we usually have metaphors in our subconscious minds, which are essentially symbols. It could be visual, it could be verbal, but these are things that our subconscious has learned to associate between things. And by manipulating or changing or fine-tuning the symbol, we can then alter the experience.
That's super interesting. But
now, after we alter the experience and the person is in, let's say, a shifted state, it's important to kind of bank on that and use this momentum. Otherwise, yes, like we have a session, we feel great, we feel inspired, but we immediately get pulled into our old conditioning and into societal conditioning, and we found ourselves like pulled back to our old self.
that's the problem I think a lot of people are experiencing in different types of coaching, that they feel this elevation and then they just go back to their own patterns and they're like, what just happened, you know?
Right. And this is why it's important to take one step further from like the inspirational speaker kind of role. So like once we make the shift, it's important to also take action. Now, this action is going to propel us forward and start cementing this new self that we've unraveled.
And how does authenticity come into play here?
Well, I mean, usually the shift allows us to get this glimpse into our authenticity. But then again, in order to make it stick, we have to take action. And that action can be even just committing to something. But it's important to figure out an action plan from the altered state and then commit to it.
And this process is requiring from the person who is taking it to be very honest with themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when our authentic self is given the chance to suddenly speak up, it's going to take that.
I see. And like, what do you consider as the authentic self or authenticity? Like, when do you know that a client of yours has reached this moment?
Well, I mean, when we live our authentic self, we have clarity as to like what we do, what we're here to do, what our action. Sometimes we might not have clarity as like to like 100 steps forward, but we would at least have clarity as to what is the one step that myself, my authentic self, wants me to take now.
That's very interesting, because I think for me it's coming a bit like epilepsy attack. It's coming like in a lightning storm.
Yeah.
And this is, as an entrepreneur, what I do. Okay, I need to say something to the world, so I'm starting a podcast, or I have to make this thing happen because like I want to help people, so I'm starting a project. But this clarity that you're talking about, I felt it maybe 2 or 3 times in my life only. One of those times was in this junction in lockdown, when I had to decide if I'm staying in Vienna despite being pretty much alone there because everybody left due to COVID. Because I had this huge hunch that I have to stay in Vienna. I was right. I met my future wife there. But this moment also felt completely different. It was not like this lightning storm that, oh, I have this urge to do something entrepreneurial, but I want to feel more connected to myself. Therefore, I'm here, kind of.
So this is what I call the like inspired action moment. You are inspired to take a specific line of action.
So, if your theory is correct, a lot of entrepreneurs like me are motivating by different type of urges. We can maybe define them, but they're not in the inspired moment when they start something. Because I think that entrepreneurship is not about these eureka moments a lot of time, but by more of an urge to do something.
Well, I mean, I think that urge to, it's, do you mean an urge to do anything or an urge to do something?
Look, like this thing with the patient school, it was something that I thought about for a while, and I really wanted to make it happen. I think that was the authentic moment, this inspired action that I had. The less authentic moment was the fear that I cannot make it on my own, and then just connect to a group of people that were interested in doing this, even though deep inside I knew it's going to put a lot of hinges inside the process. So I had an authentic moment, but then a fear took over, and the result is that it's a very messy road.
Right. And that's why I said usually the main block on our way to really living our authenticity, and we all struggle with it. I mean, I definitely struggle with it on a daily basis. I mean, it's a lifelong process.
Yeah.
But it's fear. Fear is usually what's stopping us from really following through on these inspired actions.
And I know, in the 3 or 4 minutes we have left, you cannot break down the fear of all the listeners. But if we were in a coaching session and I came to you and giving you these examples, would you have a technique to suggest me or a method?
The first thing I would suggest anyone who is trying to kind of understand how to work around fear is to allow themselves to feel it. Because usually we are afraid of feeling afraid.
Yeah, we do.
So we don't allow ourselves to really like sit and feel the fear, because any emotion, fear included, is here to give us some kind of a signal, some kind of a message. And fear as well is here to tell us, hey, like you should pay attention to this. You should be aware or alert to this. So this would be like the first step. Obviously, there are like several steps following that, but that would be the first. The first is to allow ourselves to really feel what we're feeling.
That's very interesting, because I think that a lot of time we're kind of self-sabotaging because we have a bit of clarity and then we are afraid of the failure. But as entrepreneurs, sometimes you think that we are failure fear like prone. We like, it's okay, we like all the fuck up nice culture, we can completely fail, like gloriously fail. But actually what I noticed about myself, I see it also in university, when I prefer not to study to a test and fail than really study hard and fail, because this bitterness inside is very strong. I think that a lot of time, because I'm not letting myself, or we are entrepreneur, really wallowing into fear and understand it, we're really kind of sabotaging our own way into success.
Right. So, I mean, there is a difference though between feeling the fear and wallowing in it. So, like, we don't want to wallow in the fear. We want to really like let it be heard and then take action, because just like any emotion, it's a signal, a call to action. So
it's super interesting, yeah, and we're probably going to have a second part to this. But to summarize this part, like, how could you put in words what is authenticity for you?
um again, for me, as someone who is sacral, my authenticity is doing what really like lights me up.
Lights you up. So simple, and yet so many people, when they're going on a transformation journey, they're looking all around them and have to travel to this other side of the world. But this little spark inside, that what lights you up, but which all of us have, is something that a lot of time is being missed. um, Yair, I think that this was really meaningful for me, and I'm sure for other listeners. I think that we can use this open invitation to do another second part. So Yair, it's been much shorter than I expected. Usually when we have around 40-minute session with guests, it's like more than enough. But this subject required a lot of in-depth. What I'm going to do is, firstly, in the description of this podcast, I'm going to put the link to your website. Yair is traveling around the world looking for his true, authentic, physical place to plant it himself. But he's offering coaching online to single peoples, and as far as I know, also sometimes for groups. And you are more than welcome to reach him. Yair has helped me tremendously in several important junctions in my life, and I really recommend you to read more about him and connect to him in social media. He has a lot of important things to say about life changes, journey, and authenticity. That was the first episode of the new season of Revolution from Your Bed, after 6 months of taking a break due to a relapse of my pot syndrome. And do you have final words, Yair, before we finish this one?
Not really. I just really excited to see what authentic selves I'll get exposed to in the near future.
Thank you. For you and for me as well. I promise that throughout this season, my aim is not only showcase other people's work or talk about things that matter to me like I did in other season, but I want to share my growth process connected to my authenticity, and that's why you are the first guest in this season. And I think it's a true honor for me that you agreed to do it. Thank you so much again for being here. Enjoy your stay in Taiwan, and who knows where next. And we will record soon the second part for this, because I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of emails asking for it.
Nice.
Thank you so much, Yair.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next week.